When we hear the word cross, we should immediately think of victory. We should always have a strong association between the word cross and the word victory, especially in the Maronite Church. If we listen to the reading today, we hear this story about Moses being up on a mountain, and the Israelites are battling against I think it was the Amalekites, and whenever Moses' hands are up like this in a prayer position, they're winning. And whenever they're down, they start losing. So the obvious solution, prop Moses' arms up throughout the entire battle so that we can win. That's the beginning where we start to get this image of the cross as a symbol of victory, because here's Moses standing here. He doesn't even know why this position is so effective, because he doesn't know its relationship to the cross. But we know that the cross gives us victory. And so we have this expression in Christian tradition that we are fighting from victory. In other words, we're fighting, we're in conflict sometimes, but we know that we're going to win in the end, that any Christian who perseveres in God's grace is going to have salvation. It's not like God has anybody competing against him, and so maybe we could do everything right, but then God loses against the other dark side of the force or whatever, and now nobody gets salvation just because God wasn't strong enough. That's not an option that's on the table. You will have victory. We will have victory if we are close to God, if we persevere in his grace. And that should fill us with confidence. But it is possible to be overconfident as well. The fact that our victory is guaranteed shouldn't lead us to think that we are not fighting in a war. We are fighting in a war. We're called the church militant, and our opponent is the devil, and he's much stronger than us. The devil has an angelic nature because he's a fallen angel, and the angelic nature is much more powerful than human nature. And so without God's grace, we lose that battle. And what virtue is important in every war and in every battle? It's the virtue of courage. Now, many of us might not think of courage as a necessary virtue for everyone to have. I think sometimes we think of courage as the virtue for heroes, for people who do extraordinary acts. Courage is necessary if you're going to go and save people who are tied on train tracks, or save dogs from burning buildings, or whatever it may be. But if you're just going to live a normal life, if you just want to be an average good person, then you don't need courage. This is not true. Every single person needs courage. It's a critical and important virtue, and it's one of the 4 cardinal virtues. The 4 cardinal virtues, maybe you've heard these before. They're in the Old Testament. They're also in Plato and Aristotle. Prudence, justice, temperance, and the last one is fortitude, which is just another word for courage. Now we can see why we need the other 3 virtues. We need prudence, because prudence is about making good decisions, right? Having a good, perfecting your mind, let's say. That's prudence, right? You can understand why we would need to be able to think well. Temperance we can understand. It's about moderation, so we don't hurt ourselves by binging, and we can hurt other people by binging as well. Temperance, moderation, that makes sense to us. Justice is important, of course. We got to be able to live in society. We have to give each person what is due to them. But courage, I'm not fighting in a war. Why do I need courage? Courage is the virtue by which we do the right thing even when it's difficult. Courage is the virtue where we do the right thing even when it's difficult. Because most people don't wake up in the morning and think, I want to do something really bad today. I really want to cause as much chaos as possible. No, that's not how people do bad things. People wake up in the morning thinking, I want to do the right thing, usually. I want to do good today. But what they find is a situation where if they do good, they have to suffer. And if there isn't enough courage, we will choose evil over good. We will choose evil over good if there is suffering standing in the way of doing what is right, if we don't have enough courage. And this is why the virtue of courage is so important. When I was a kid, I mentioned my mom last homily, so I'm going to mention my dad this homily. When I was a kid, my dad used to ask me a question. And in retrospect, I think he was probably using it as a starter to open up a conversation about how to invest well. And instead, he just realized that I wasn't ready. Because he would ask me, Peter, would you like 1 candy bar right now or 2 candy bars tomorrow? And the objectively better answer is to go for 2 candy bars tomorrow, because you get more, and it's not even that much time to wait. And I would always tell him, I want 1 candy bar right now. Because I was afraid of the suffering involved in waiting 24 hours to get an additional candy bar. It's funny when it's just candy bars. But when we're talking about how we treat other people and our family and our friends, there's a lot more at stake with courage. Courage is involved in being a parent, and being a spouse, and being a student. When we have to forgive our spouse, that involves courage. When we have to wake up in the middle of the night to feed the baby, that involves courage. When we have to wake up the next day after only getting a few hours of sleep and do our work, that involves courage. When we're a student and we have our finals coming up, that takes courage. When we are struggling in our dating life and we have a broken heart, it takes courage to get back up and keep trying. When we have to go out of our comfort zone and meet new people, that takes courage. Courage is not an optional virtue. We need courage just to live a good life. And the beautiful thing is that Jesus not only gives us an example of courage, but he helps us to live courageously. We look at Jesus' life and we hear a gospel like this where even Jesus is saying, I'm troubled about what's coming. I know what's coming. I've read the prophets. I know why I'm here. I'm here to suffer and to die on a cross. And Jesus himself is troubled about that. And there's so many ways that Jesus could have avoided this. He could have healed Lazarus before Lazarus died, because that was one of the triggering moments that led to Jesus' crucifixion. He could have just stopped preaching altogether. He could have gone back to the drawing board and said, hey, I'm God. I can save people however I want. Surely I can find a way to do this without suffering and dying on a cross. But Jesus was courageous. And he was courageous because everything that he did out of love. And our Lord can take our own fear of suffering and transform it into love in the same way that he transformed the power of the cross. And through that transformation, we can become courageous. Suffering is easier to do, and it can even be joyful if we are willing to suffer out of love, if we unite those sufferings to our Lord. And so Jesus, in this journey of courage, is both an example of courage for us and a help who gives us the grace to transform our suffering into love so that we too can live a courageous life.